They're continuously starting to learn more and more about your environment.
I think the humanoid robotics is something that's on the rise at the moment.
We've all seen the Spot robot dog with the scanners on it.
And autonomous drones that are out there.
That's going to be the next evolution of who we hire, not data analytics or mathematicians, but gamers.
We are integrating technology into our curriculum to ensure that the students are making those connections with their skills of video games.
Using AI to automatically recognize and classify objects within imagery.
Insights that were previously inconceivable without artificial intelligence.
Machine learning models, agriculture looking at crops, areas like airports and buildings where they're looking at traffic flow, even in retail, route optimization.
VPS technology or visual positioning systems, nuclear, utilities and power generation. From a flying robotics or the autonomy drone perspective.
Is the project big enough to support a robot on it full time? What different things are you going to put on that robot that's doing the autonomous capture?
And now we're not reliant on, okay, well, what's the cost for someone to come out? Are you available in the next 2 weeks?
It's going to be everywhere, whether we realize it or not.
This is going to be fun.
This is going to be
This is going
fun.
to be fun.
I'm glad that you started with this. Is going to be fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And everything on the screen. Yes. Yes. Let's do it.
Yes. Well, thank you guys again, everyone who's still hanging out. I know we have had a fun, long 3 days, lots of information. And one thing I love, which I'll even just throw it out now, is just a reminder that we're recording all of this information. So anybody who missed a panel, missed a presentation, you're going to get to rewatch it if you missed any. So I'm excited to have this. Is this our last panel?
It is.
It's the last panel of the conference.
You saved the best for last.
The best for last. No, I love the topic though. Excited, again, every panel, we've got a very awesome, diverse group up here, different experience. And this is another one of those topics that I believe in our industry is still in its infancy, right? We don't have robotics out on every job site. And AI recently, especially with that fun, little tool that helps us all type funny questions in called ChatGPT, people have now started, general public going, what's AI? How's it going to integrate? And all of these come back into our industry and we're like, well, how can those be used within what we're doing? How can they be integrated into the data that we're creating and solving problems? So it'll be a fun conversation as always. And let's go ahead and start with our introductions and we'll start down here.
Hi, I'm Chris McKee. I work for Turner Construction. I'm not a robotics guy, but I've been surveying for 30 years or so. And I think that because the surveying field has shown me so much technology with robotic total stations, the scanners, GNSS, all that, it kind of plays into robots. You got to have a technical background with robotics with robotics because of that technology. So I'm excited to be here. This is going to be fun.
Hey everyone, my name is Alex Bakovitz, co-founder and CEO at Mach9. We're building the fastest tools for automated geospatial production, helping surveyors make maps 30 times faster with AI. Some of my background came out of Carnegie Mellon in the Robotics Institute, worked on a number of programs for DARPA, NASA, Fluor Portsmouth, and a number of really exciting projects that we'll hopefully take a deeper dive into today. And really excited about the prospects and influences of where AI and robotic-based technologies is really going to affect the reality capture space and broader engineering, construction related industry. So it's going to be a really exciting conversation. Really excited to hear some interesting perspectives.
Hi, I'm Rhea Kara. I work for DPR Construction. I'm the Austin Business Unit VDC Manager. Coming from the BIM world, basically working alongside our FTG groups and our innovation teams to find use cases to pilot some of the innovative solutions that often touch robotics and artificial intelligence. So kind of spending my time trying to pilot these solutions, find a use case to try them out, and providing that feedback to tech companies to help them build their software and help them serve us better.
Awesome. Hey, Stephen Uecki, CEO, SuperDroid Robots, structural engineer by training, I guess, and by practice. So still do some of that today. So review and stamp drawings, but also in the robotics area for around 5 years now. And looking for ways to bring what's currently available into construction And so excited to talk more about that today.
Wade Eno, On-Site 3D. There's two businesses underneath the brand. One is digital solutions. The next is industrial services, combination of digital twin plus industrial application. Big advocate for the energy industry, oil and gas, making the positive impacts that we need to. And I'm a purchaser of robots and an integrator, kind of a first adopter that beats all the big companies to the punch. So, yeah.
There we go.
Ted Moore. I'm up here representing Cadnetics, and I've had the opportunity to sort of be a technology bartender to the AEC industry over the years, building companies that offer a lot of technology solutions. And Cadnetics offers the design support for architects and engineers, VDC, BIM services, and then also reality capture is one of the specialties. So we're always looking for ways to take a pragmatic approach to new technology, integrate it in to solve solutions. Somebody had said earlier, on one of the panels that there's a big challenge in having all these really cool tools is that sometimes we try to adopt them and then go find problems for them. I've found a lot of success in looking for the problems first. There's plenty of them. So
Awesome.
Glad to be here.
Good. Well, it's great to have all of you. And just a reminder, I already see first questions coming in, but just a reminder again, you can submit questions throughout and we'll watch those as we go. I'd like to start with laying some of the foundation. I'm sure there are plenty of people in the room who are not using any robotics and have no idea about where AI could play a role in our industry. And I know we cover a lot of backgrounds, a lot of applications, and what industries maybe we're serving. But I'd like to start with posing the question, and maybe we'll start with robotics. What are some of the current applications for robotics that have to do with the technologies and the focus of our overall industry, innovation in the built environment? Where does robotics currently play a role?
I think it plays a role in just about anything. We're trying to I was talking to Steve like last couple of days we've been talking to try to get some kind of robotics in just about everything because the workforce is just not there. And maybe someone posed a question about that. But we have to be creative on how we can make those repeatable, mundane, ordinary tasks into something that's more standard. So something that we can keep the same paths and the same photos and all that repeatability is easy to do with a robot.
To add to what he said, it's also a matter of the exposure and the risk, right? So using robotics, for example, when you have to be exposed to some chemical, right, or working at a high elevation, as well as repetitive stress movements that could expose your joints and help our craft stay in the trade longer by using and leveraging robotics. Currently, where we're seeing it used mostly, at least at DPR, is for layout, exoskeletons. We're also using it for placing. There are like solutions out there that we're looking at for placing drywall, finishing drywall, drilling through concrete. I'm sure there's a lot more, but that's just a few of few solutions where robots are being used nowadays, and definitely layout.
So,
go ahead.
I was going to just say, echoing Ted's point earlier, I think problem-driven solutions really, really matter. And one of my first projects in the robotics industry was with Fluor at Portsmouth, which is a nuclear facility from the Manhattan Project days. We built a lot of in-pipe systems to go look at gaseous diffusion process piping. What really was very important for a project like that was the epitome of what makes a robotic project successful, doing the dull, dangerous, and dirty things that no human should be subject to having to do. That's not sending someone into a radioactive pipe is not something that anyone is interested in. So being able to provide a project where not only were you solving the problem of getting into a dull, dirty, dangerous situation, but the clear ROI for the client, the Department of Energy, Office of Environmental Management in this case, was very clear. Instead of doing something super slowly, manually, putting people at risk and in harm's way and affecting the way that you would actually implement a process, being able to leverage robotic technology to acquire the insights and information that you're looking for that provides that high ROI output, in addition to solving those other problems. I think that that's what makes projects really successful, is when you can scope something out and see value both to the people that you work with as well as the client that you're servicing all at the same time.
It's natural, I think, for us to focus on industrial facility management and design, construction, those kind of things, just because it's what we do. For the most part, within the reality capture industry, I think one of the early adopters of robotics, AI, the technology associated with it. And we miss sometimes the commercial facility management applications of robotics and reality capture. And even at my house, I have a robot running around doing, the floor cleaning, mapping the house while it's doing it, which sort of leads into a lot of interest that I'm hearing from more of the commercial facility management groups that want to know how they could diversify the payloads, right, of some of their robots to gain more value out of it. There's been a lot of talk about ROI too, and that's one of the exciting things is, we gain all this informational value from the construction phase, and then we're using robots, we're using AI to do it. Then we go into the operational phase of a facility that could just be an office building. And where can we take what we've gained, that value here, and move it over into that? There's tremendous spaces there. I'm sure from the robotics side, you guys are seeing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the other use cases I was going to say I've seen is the drywall finishing. That I think it's Canvas is the company name that's doing that. But yeah, I think that seeing the reality capture is probably the most common use case, where you're essentially carrying around a camera, but maybe other sensors as well. Our company also works outside of construction, where I know you said it was construction's early adopters, but there are some industries that are far, far ahead, even decades ahead. SWAT teams, EOD, things like that have been using robots for, 20 years probably. But yeah, as far as using them in situations that maybe aren't as dangerous, that's where, because construction is dangerous, but there's a lot of things, it's more the dull things that I think that people are looking at right now to try to automate that.
Yeah, just touching base on, I'm a capitalist at heart, so I like making money. So big focus for me was finding robotic equipment that made me more money. First robot I had was a Trimble robotic total station. I think not to overview that one. That was kind of my first excitement into it, and it replaced having a helper. So I made more money. So then moving into, getting a little bit more focused on our industrial side, implementing robotic welding systems, which isn't new. I think the automotive industry has been all over that far before what I'm focused on process piping. So bringing that in, it lowered our labor force, de-risked our projects, and then tying in with our digital twin side of it, and how much control we had over our process, knowing that we had those control paths already built with the environments. So now we can simulate our manufacturing processes with the equipment, which is difficult to do with humans. Obviously, there's a variable there. So it was just having, risk control, risk mitigation around our manufacturing side of our business, and overall just tying it in with the digital twin and leveraging that data to another exploitation route of ultimately, providing value to clients, providing internal value to our profit margins, and making money.
It's funny that you mentioned control. It seems like every conversation that comes up here has been about control, and control's been around for, 2,000 years. The Egyptians used it to build the pyramids, and any robot has to have a point of origin of some sort to manufacture, manufacturing, to walk and spot. You still have to have some kind of control on site. So having that foot in the past on the history of how things are done, and then have the other foot in the future to kind of innovate and push that forward. But you still have to have that foot in the past to see how things are done, to be able to improve on what you're going to be doing in the future, even with robots.
And to add to that, you could have an improved accuracy depending on obviously the setup, control, your total station, and your operators. So going a little bit beyond that, I don't think the robot will eventually take over the operator's existence completely, or not having people out there to still monitor it, whether it's for AI or robotics. But yeah, that you could have some instances where accuracy and repetitive patterns are more in line with each other when you're using a robot over, a human doing the work.
So surveyors always have a job. That's good.
Yeah,
Good to
make
know.
sure you do.
Well, I think you brought up two things there. One is the accuracy, and I was talking with Chris earlier about this, that the accuracy, sometimes just because you can get it doesn't mean you should. So we talk to a lot of people that say, well, I use this sensor and it gets this accuracy, and so I want this to be automated. But sometimes we have to step back and say, what is this data? If you're capturing data, what is it used for? And what accuracy do you actually need? Because automating something within a millimeter is a lot harder than automating something within 6 inches or 1 inch or something like that. The second thing is the labor replacement. So you brought that up as well. And our position is that some jobs will be transitioned or automated, but there will be other jobs opened, or that combined with shrinkage in labor force, at least that type of labor. So what it looks like in 10 years or 20 years, nobody could possibly know that. But, we've got to keep moving forward down the path, and everyone's got to adapt in some way, because somebody's going to do it. So if you want to have a part in it, then you might as well be the one that does it.
Yeah, I made an analogy on that. I'm not trying to say that robots are taking away the jobs. I think that we're the stock exchange, what it was like 50 years ago, where you had people that traded stocks, and now it's all IT based.
Mm-hmm.
So those jobs never disappeared. They just transitioned over to something a little more technical. So I think that the newer generation that's coming out now, and that makes me feel old. The newer generation comes out now, they have that, if they can learn how things are done originally and how things were that foot in the past, then I think they can just explode into the future with robots and all kinds of crazy stuff and make more jobs.
And another thing that we see on top of this, so I know a lot of the conversation right now has been in terms of accuracy, like driven like performance, getting people out of certain situations. But I think something not to discount is consistency, understanding and being able to successfully predict what the outcome of a job is going to be, right? Knowing that you're going to have the same result, whether it's good, bad, or in the middle somewhere, from an automated system. Like it provides assurances around what you're doing in a project. Maybe that minimizes rework. Maybe that accelerates workflows. Maybe that prevents having to do as much double checking all at the same time. I think that consistency is where we're also going to see a tremendous amount of value through adoption of these types of automated workflows, whether they're in software or if they're just a mechatronic or a like robotic system, all at the same time.
So I'll pose a question. Go ahead. Sorry, I'll pose a question because I get this a lot. Do you think that that with robotic technology that you won't be able to do those repeatable things? Like you're gonna have to have someone there all the time, which doesn't really make it autonomous. So how does that work in the workplace? What happens if I come in, I see a robot walk in and I'm like, oh, great, it's going to take my job. But, what do you do with that? How do you talk to someone about that? How do you say, no, it's not taking your job? You can still push a broom, I guess, or, put a panel up. So how do you express that to the people that don't understand robotics?
Well, it's semi-autonomous first off, right? So currently it's not fully autonomous, right?
I am. I am. I can say it honestly, that Spot is fully autonomous. Completely autonomous.
Well, but doesn't that give you more time then to grow and invest your time into doing more or finding other things, right? So for example, in the world of BIM, clash detection, we're sitting there spending hours and hours. Automating that helps us grow quantity takeoff, helps us grow visual planning, production planning, and tracking. So actually finding solutions that streamline the mundane tasks that we're doing all day is helping us grow as an industry and actually hire more people to do more things that may just not be the same thing that they used to do, just something new and something different that is helping our industry grow and kind of look at the future of construction, where we're going.
And I also see another major component, right? One of the things that is affecting just the broad like AEC industry, as well as like the infrastructure industry and all of the major stakeholders to reality capture a shrinking workforce or an aging workforce. This is a really big challenge. Like, how are we going to be able to do more with less? I think being able to answer those questions are very important. But I also think it's also worth noting at the same time, one of my someone from my university, Manuela Velosa, was a very famous like machine learning scientist. She always talks about like all these people are trying to work on like hands. Like no one is going to build like the human hand and like solve that particular problem. There are things that robots will be able to do, right? Spot can walk around, capture all this information and content. That's something that is approachable today. But then there's certainly a lot of skills and trades that effectively cannot be changed or replaced by automation with anything remotely close to, even with the best AI systems or the best machine learning systems. You're not going to be able to replicate the human hand, as an example. And maybe one day that will be the case, but there's a lot of progress in implementation and development and innovation that needs to happen to get us from point A to point B. And some of the most important things, whether it's like BIM clash detection to wide range of other workflows and problems, that automation just frees us up to do more with what we have today.
Sitting around a conference table, we could talk about things like that, right? But the reality, boots on the ground, is a lot different. Wade was talking with us backstage a little bit about you went to the job sites, right? Because there was like physical potential threat to the equipment you were bringing out there.
Yeah, just to be blunt, I am the job site. I'm a trades guy. Came up, I got the robotic tool station to be better than my peers and be more competitive. It's a competitive environment, low cost commodity. You got to come in with innovation. You got to showcase it. You got to do it. So a couple points on the side of it is, how do you go talk to your staff and say, hey, here's some new automation equipment that's not going to take your job. Payroll's the biggest part of a construction job when you're going into it, when you go through labor, equipment, materials. So I bolted, I went into, I call it like rebel territory up in northern Alberta. It's a low tech zone. It's very labor intensive. Everyone's a CEO of some sort of labor task. And I took 2 artificially intelligent robotic machines and I bolted them in and upped my security. Wasn't very popular equipment. And from that, when you're talking about consistency, going back to welding, any welders in the crowd fight you in the parking lot after, but very inconsistent, top welder one day, next day, maybe some mental health issues at home with the wife or too many whiskeys. And the next day you got 8 repairs on your best guy. And you're like, what's going on? Where we brought in the automated welding, you get the same result every single time. And it's perfect. Like no human can compete with that level of quality. And then if we're talking about the data world and what we're getting back from it, there's absolutely no way that the human process of how we do it can get that level of quality control back. The robotic equipment's running quality control parameters in milliseconds and giving you data tables that you can take and hyperlink to your digital twin. You can watch a video feed of the weld actually getting done as if you were the welder staring at it. And that's not possible with a conventional method. So once again, it's just de-risking my business and putting myself ahead in the industry to, be more competitive.
Great points. And I'm going to steer some questions now. I mean, I feel like this panel could just sit here and talk forever. There's a lot to talk about. So we do have quite a few questions coming in. So I'll do my best to keep guiding some of these. So with what we've talked about now and where robotics are and where we see it going, what is impeding scaling robots across every job site, and how does our industry overcome those challenges?
Price and knowledge.
Expensive.
So currently price is a big one.
I'd say workflow integration. Workflows are really expensive to create. Changing workflows are really expensive, even more expensive than creating the first one in the first place. And so by finding ways to intelligently combine these types of technologies into new workflows, that's a really hard change for a lot of our industry that's been doing things, oftentimes the same way for decades.
We've talked about that at some of our job sites and some of the things that we get integrated, especially with the robots. And our key is to try to get into a current workflow and just modify that workflow, because you got superintendents that are out there and they do the exact same job every single day. That's quantifiable. The manager knows how long it takes for him to do that job. And if we can bring that workflow in and kind of modify it a little bit, it helps, but it's still, how do we put a price on that? So
I have a separate approach to that. I basically kick the old school welding outside and don't come near my automation stuff. And then I have a younger team that's more focused on growing up with video games, because ours are considered cobots. They're collaborative robots. They are fairly autonomous in the welding function, but there is a little bit of, handling that comes before it. And I have a lot younger team that's running that, because a lot of it's like, manipulation with a joystick and a screen. It's literally like a video game. So I keep the naysayers and the negative personalities away from kind of the automation equipment. So I reduce that conflict in between the workflow integrations.
And is it integrated enough to even hit a point of scaling right now? You think about like the robotic welders and that kind of equipment. It takes me into the fab shops where you've had CNCs and things out for decades, but you still don't see prefabrication on every project, right? So not to be a Debbie Downer, I don't know that it scales across it, like to the extent that we would see it in like a sci-fi type environment, at least not here. To get into the future, I'm out of Florida with Cape Canaveral. I can see the rockets launching every week from my backyard, and I know they're going to be building like a moon base, right? So I think maybe when we talk about scalability, it's a different environmental consideration where now we can't have people up there building as effectively as we could deliver robots that were almost providing a proof of concept here on Earth before we start going to the moon or to Mars, which it's right around the corner. So I think maybe that's the point that we swing farther into the scalability.
So what about specifically, let's narrow it down even, like what about specifically using robotics on job sites, even the most basic? So for capture, like you're talking about Spot, everybody sees Spot walking around at every conference, but we don't actually see a ton of people out on job sites with those yet. I think there are some that have started the R&D, some that are figuring things out, but what will it take to take that process and say, hey, we've got this building, we want to install robotics. Those need to go through the job site every day or once a week to capture. What are some of the things that are limiting us from that starting to become more normal?
So an analogy that I have is 20 years ago, robotic total stations came out. Some of those old school surveyors were like, I am not using that thing. It's not accurate enough. It's too much. It's too heavy. Takes too much batteries. I can do just as fast with a conventional total station with 3 guys. Then we got a robotic total stations and went from 3 guys to 2 guys in the field and 1 guy in the office doing more. And then it went from 1 guy and 2 guys in the office doing more. So it was having someone take that step and say, we're going to do it. We're going to integrate it, and we're going to just keep going with it until we get it right. And it's that one step that someone looks at and goes, oh, so they're doing it. If they can do it, then we can do it. So you get that one step going. And it's like that with any technology. I mean, look at Steve Jobs with Apple. He wasn't the first one that came out with an iPhone, but he was the first one to say, I don't have a button on it. A simple little change in that technology, made a huge difference.
Stand Spot up.
Who's the champion I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, I was just saying stand Spot up. Humanoids, I think that's the next wave. That's what I'm excited about. That's the next step of my purchasing of robots. I guess the consumption and application. is, okay, the welding task. Looked at that. Hey, we're doing pretty good with that. We're getting repeatability. We're getting consistency. We're able to lower our commodity price, get more competitive. On our side of it, it's like, okay, now how the handling, because the handling became the bigger problem. We could feed the robots and the robots did really well at the consistency, but then it's upstream, downstream. And then I looked at conveyor belts and rollers and all your typical automation stuff, but nothing really worked for pipe because it has odd angles and everything. And then I started studying the humanoids, and basically it's stood up with some payload and the ability to traverse. And if you have a digital twin like we do of our manufacturing facility, you can plan a sequence of events and give it a control path so it picks heavy stuff up and puts it down in another area, which is kind of that mundane labor task that we're talking about. But yeah, anyways, that's my point.
Definitely my perspective here as well, like coming back to the topic of workflow. Like the reason why I assume that like the welding component has been so successful is that the person or like the group that like you put together to like build automated welding machines were just obsessed with the ability to automate the task, right? If it only automated like half of the weld and you had to do the other half manually, that wouldn't be as valuable as being able to really solve a complete problem. And I think in our world at Mach 9, where we're working on like map making software, when people think about bringing AI into like map production workflows, as an example, one major concern is, am I going to have to do so much quality control on an automatically generated map that it's going to just defeat the purpose of automating something, because you don't want to pay twice for the same thing that you're going to build by paying it once. And really the core component goes to the people building the technology as well as those implementing it, because it's really, really important to show value and show productivity, show efficiency on bringing robotics into a workflow so that you can actually see it automate the job that it was designed to do. Or you actually developed a new workflow where robotics and AI might be a component of it, but you at least are able to show a holistic greater value that's being generated such that you don't need to do the same job twice.
Yeah, just real quick. So I think that there's two things. Most of it comes back to money, but the other thing is hype. So a lot of people have been burned over the past 5 or 10 years with this is going to do this and we're sure about it. It goes onto the site and then flops. And so that's one thing. But the bigger thing, I think, is the money, where people bring it up as two things, money but it's too much work. We have to set up these things. We have to integrate it into our workflow. We have to have this certain software to control it. But really, that doesn't matter. If it would save them $1 million a day, none of that would matter. So it comes back to price of the unit and the cost of managing it in the process.
And also keeping it busy, because a lot of times like you're renting a robot for say a month, but you only need it for 2 days.
Right.
So do I have another project that I can use that robot on to justify that investment, right? So that's also something that we've been kind of trying to figure out. Okay, like if I bring it to this project, can I maybe then send it to San Antonio for a few days so that as a whole business unit, we're all taking advantage and it's not just benefiting one project. So that's also something to think about on price point.
Social aspect, right? I was kind of making a joke. I was like, what if we walked out here with a humanoid that sat down next to us and people would kind of be like, whoa.
Next year.
And next year. Thinking, I talked to my wife about this because she's not tech. She doesn't like tech, and which is our polar. And we're talking about Spot, and she was like, okay, well, that's not too bad. It's a dog. And I was like, yeah, well, what if it stood up and had a head? And she's like, that's not cool. No, I don't like that. That's iRobot style. And I'm like, well, that's literally all it is. It's going to go vertical. So I think there's a social acceptance and a wave, I guess. I think everyone's kind of seen the Elon Musk factories, whether how accurate they are, or how many robots he's building or coming out. But yeah, it's the dystopian side of the iRobot movie. It kind of puts a little notion in the back of your head of, hey, there's evil wherever there's good too, right?
Well, if we get in a robot apocalypse, we're there on the front line. So
perfect.
That's where I'm at.
You're
it that
the
way.
driver.
Yeah.
We were talking about keeping them busy, right? We're talking about workflows, and there's almost this correlation between like the stage and development of AI right now, where the AI is in that narrow phase where it's very good at a particular thing. It seems like it's very diverse and there's different applications for it, but it has a very specific use case and process that it goes through, whether it's machine learning or language generation. And I feel like maybe we're in that same space with robotics. When I was talking at the beginning about the diversification of payloads, but there's still something you have to do to change that, to get it now to do something else. And then you have to be creative. We shouldn't have to think about how are we going to utilize this. We almost needed that next phase where they can multitask, they can perform multiple functions without the concern about how do we keep it busy. There should be too many things for it to do.
Yeah. Well, and that's the funny part. If you see, I drive past construction sites all the time that have excavators sitting out there doing nothing for days or weeks, and people are fine with that. But if there's a robot sitting there, even if the value proposition is it saves me a ton of money, they don't want it to just be sitting there. So it's interesting how that's different in robotics than it is in other equipment.
Yeah, it's still cheaper than 10 city workers standing around doing nothing.
Yeah. And diesel fuel sitting in a dozer that's not doing anything.
Yeah. It might be appreciating.
That's true.
Do you see remote controls becoming more robust with ways to operate from afar for safety reasons?
Yes. Sorry, I don't keep answering first, but yes.
You're at the end of the line.
If this was Jeopardy,
Hey, as long as y'all take turns, I don't care who goes in order. But
yeah, I've seen so on the dozer thing, we are like just hundreds away from having a fully autonomous dozer, excavator, dump truck on a site, but it's always about communication. It's always about keeping that secure communication, knowing if something goes out of bounds, it's not going to kill anybody. Because if you have a big D8 running around that's pushing dirt like that, you got to have that remote control access. So, shortwave remote control from a trailer instead of sitting out in the dozer has always been an option, and it's really close. But then you still have those people that go, well, we're not going to do that for a safety reason, but they don't look into the security side of that, of keeping that signal. It is safe. Radio signal has been around for, I don't know, since World War I, maybe even before that. So it's always been secure. But taking that to the next step, you just need that one person to get out 2 or 3 dozers and an excavator and a bulldozer, and it would change the industry.
I could touch on on that part of it, because the manufacturer of the equipment that we have, they're in Vancouver, and they can log in and remotely control the machine. And our operators can do the same. They can log in from their couch and they can operate the machine. And then touching base on another company in Canada, they fully automated their big, in the oil sands, in the mines, they had fully automated dump trucks that were traveling, but they found out they were so precise in following the control paths that they were actually packing the ground down and making ruts. So then they had to program them in to do a little bit of a wave, so they weren't wrecking roads. And but yeah, so I would say yes, they already are.
Yeah, I think the main thing holding robotics companies back from that is the security issue. So you got a robotic arm with a welder on, somebody can control it. What if they had a bad day and they, did all this stuff? So I think that's why some of the companies have been hesitant and done it, local area networks, and not just broadcasted it up to the internet, because there is a huge security concern with that. That affects safety of real people that are around it.
You don't want someone hacking a dozer and driving it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Pandora's box, tech's already open.
Yeah,
that would be bad.
So thinking kind of future, thinking 10 years out, how would you like to see the industry using AI and robots? What's something that's not being done yet that we think is coming?
I'm not going to go first on this.
Yeah, I'll go first. So the thing with automating reality capture is there's still not everyone in construction sees the value of progress monitoring right now. It's I don't want to call it ancillary, but it's not the main product that construction companies are producing. And so I would like to see it go more towards that. So we're actually doing stuff that is billable. Right now, everyone on the job has to be billable. They have to be job costed. They have to be doing something productive. And the more that robotics are doing things like that, then the easier it is for people to justify it and the wider it can go. And really that's the reason why we're also on the humanoid train and working on that, because that's most of the things that need to be automated are done by a human currently. And so if we want hardware is very difficult to do. The iterations are long. And so if we want a way to quickly transition between tasks or train new things, instead of having task-specific platforms, which is how it's done right now, we need a generalist platform and then task-specific software. And so I think that, especially with the latest advancements with not necessarily the large language model, but more the segmentation from Meta and other companies where it's more the image-based things, are getting us closer to being able to do that very quickly. And I think that at this point, hardware is actually the limiting factor. It's not the software. And being able to do useful physical, labor replacement type of tasks or augmentation tasks are probably, months away as opposed to years. So 10 years might even be too long. In 10 years, I mean,
who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Steve's right too. It's about the money, right? The closer you can get to the money and influence that's where you're going to see a lot of it. A lot of the applications that are starting to do the progress, complete for construction, they're in there monitoring the progress of it so that they can do progress pays. Right now it's an estimate, right? It's a best guess. If you can get more accurate to that, then you're really influencing people with purse strings that can then push this a little bit further along, right? There's a better guarantee, and then it becomes mandated. That's when you start to see that progress. And 10 years is a long time, especially with AI as an accelerator, right? With the language models to help us push everything from the algorithms that we've been seeing it help generate to, research and helping us make decisions and make movement faster and innovation faster. I mean, 10 years used to be to like Moore's law is no longer going to be the case.
So one thing I disagreed with a point that was previously made was that like the problem is in hardware and not software. And I would say that software still has a long way to go to be able to fundamentally operate in the environments that we want to put them in. I would say the state of, there's great segmentation models, but the industry we're in is not just 2D, it's 3D. Processing 3D data is a big problem, and perception systems that can help enable a humanoid robot to actually do the task that you want it to be able to do, to help make the map that the surveyor wants to make. That is the area that we see the most excitement and interest in, what's motivated us to build the company that we're building at Mach 9, which is how can computers see the world like how humans can, and be able to see it better than a human can, because I have stereoscopic vision. I can see vaguely 3D information. I have some understanding of depth, but I cannot create metrology grade models and understand every feature within them the same way that a computer can be able to process so quickly. And so I'm really thrilled and excited about the future as to where technology is going for the reality capture space into understanding 3D content and information, because that's going to be the thing that allows the sophisticated, amazing hardware systems that are being built out, which is a equally hard problem, if not harder problem to solve, to be married and coupled with really powerful software solutions that automate the tasks that we need them to automate all at the same time.
Well, yeah, so just to respond to that, just to be clear, I wasn't saying hardware is the problem. It's the bottleneck right now. So the software may not be to that point, but if there was hardware, it could be a lot more quickly. So that's, if we were to say we have a fully dexterous mechanical hand right now, it could do almost any task with the deep learning models that are out there right now. If they had training, if they had the conventional camera feeds and enough GPU, they could do that right now, I believe.
I would say my feedback there, and just to keep it succinct, like if that were the case, then autonomous cars would be ubiquitous right now.
But autonomous cars are way different. There's way more high speed, way more dynamic environments in the construction site.
I love it when science guys disagree.
Yeah, I was hoping there'd be a disagreement at some point.
So picking up a pistachio is not a challenge for anybody?
No.
Here's a devil's advocate of going into the future side of it. I kind of had an epiphany going into it, and it was like, own the tech or the tech's going to own you. That was kind of like a mantra that got me inspired on it. And I was like, okay, these robots are coming. It's inevitable. You know, at first I was like, okay, I'm going to move to Revelstoke, which is a mountain town in Canada, you know, probably off grid, and get out there, copper, irrigate my garden, you know, they ain't catching me. And then I was like, but I'm going to need robots to fight the robots. So I started like integrating that in, and, you know, in the future, and it took me back to scanning, because, you know, scanning is the core of most of my thoughts, like the matrix, I call it, metaverse. And I had this vision of just robots that aren't being utilized, or they went rogue or something, and they're cruising up the mountain, mapping out this area that hadn't been mapped before. And anyways, I was just like an epiphany on my end, and I was like, I'm buying robots.
You know, you're going down a path that's sort of interesting too, because I was talking about, you know, the money influencing progress and adoption, but there's also that concept of, there's a lot of free information out there, right? These Teslas driving around the place, gathering information. LiDAR, who would have thought that they'd be in cars all over the place, right? 10, 15 years ago when they were being launched in these geospatial units. What happens when we crowdsource that information for something like street inspections and asset monitoring, and it becomes readily available? That's far outside of the spectrum of my knowledge base, but it seems like it's something that specifically with Mach 9 would be impactful.
Digital cities.
Totally. I'd say that right now there's this growing abundance of all of this data that's being collected, whether it's through fleets of vehicles to platform sensors. The ability to collect content and information, even on a job site or in a like massive urban area or a utility network, transportation network. I think the really incredible power that's coming about, or what my interest is at Mach 9, is how do you do things that no human could feasibly do on their own? Like, how can you process data of the size and scale of a city, a county, a country, a continent, and answer very difficult questions? Because, you know, how many light poles are in the state of California? You know, very few people, if not anyone, actually knows the real answer to that question. And with the abundance of data, as that continues to grow and the ease of collecting it, I think that's something that I'm really excited by in terms of the problems that can be solved there.
I'm going to throw in a new one. So with some of the processes that we're doing now using the data that we're collecting, and I know we've hit a little bit, but how else do we think that AI is going to play a role in utilizing the data that we're creating?
I think that AI right now is not to the point where it makes too big decisions, if that makes any sense. Like for Spot, for an example, where there's no AI in Spot at all. It's just if-thens when in the programming. If it can't go this way, then go this way. And every time it hits something that says I can't do that, then go another way. So I think that there's levels of AI. There's the IBM Watson level, which how old is that? And then there's the Chat GPT stuff, which is a little more finer. So I think that the AI is still in its infancy, which, you know, it could ramp up pretty quick, but I don't know how that would be integrated in a use case for our case in construction, to be able to manage the changes that go on in the site, or how to log light poles, you know, when you're driving down a road. I don't know if we have enough horsepower in some of our computers to be able to manage that much data. It's going to have to be spread out, decimated somehow, to be able to collect little pieces of data.
I agree that on the GC side, we're currently witnessing a limited, use of AI, but I believe that there's a lot of opportunity there, right? So even though we have some sturdy processes, there are still some gaps. So for example, from a BIM world, quantity takeoff today does not replace the traditional takeoff. It's still a solution out there for like using, for example, software like Assemble, but AI could help us get more accurate results. On like a business development front, that AI can help us build a quick model by giving it specific parameters. Same for logistics planning. We're also using AI and drone technology nowadays, which also helps us plan our jobs better. Same for basically, I can imagine AI being used to creating a quick baseline schedule for helping us course correct when we skip a date or we're behind on something, making recommendations on how we can adjust so that we minimize our risk. Also streamlining supply chain. So there's a lot of use cases. I'm really excited to see where that's going to go. I still think we're at the beginning of it. And talking about in 10 years, I really hope that I almost feel like us as construction managers are pushing innovation, we're pushing technology, but then the people in the field are just kind of looking at us like, what are they doing? And they're kind of scared. What I'm hoping for is that, since we're also talking about the inputs and the data, the most important data in my eyes is the one that the guy who's doing the job has, the input that he has that he can provide me with so that we can advance this further. So what I hope and look forward in 10 years is for that tech that we're looking at now to be in their hands, for us to keep pushing the envelope and growing more and coming up with, different solutions out there. To expose them to less risk, expose them to provide them with, better working conditions, and also, of course, making, more profit and being able to do more work and faster and in a leaner, approach.
Yeah. I think that the use of the data the data will become a lot more useful. So talking to a large GC that says they want, they use reality capture for progress monitoring, but also they want to use it for quality control and safety. The quality control and safety specifically are perfect applications for AI, or deep learning is really what it is. So they said they wanted to be able to say there's a gusty wind on this side of the building, is all the material tied down? That's something that seems impossible right now, given, we see spot falling down the stairs. But that's a much different problem that is in a lot of ways, a lot easier. And it's possible today with the models that are out there right now, the language models and the other types of neural networks with the segmentation and neural networks. They're not logical. They're statistics basically, but they pick up, if you give them enough data, they pick that up out of the imagery, or out of the other text that they're reading or whatever. So if you said, is all the material tied down? If there was a model that was trained to answer that sort of a question, they could give you the answer. And could it be right 100% of the time? No, but it could be right as often as a human would be given the same information. And, same thing with, I think that point clouds are a huge amount of data. They are treated often as a deliverable when really they're an intermediate step. Nobody really wants a point cloud. I know that might be offensive to a lot of people, but they want what's next. And so I think that the deep learning and I think some of the softwares might be using some similar things or can be augmented with deep learning to get, what's the mesh out of here? Where are the high points? Because looking at huge amount of data and summarizing that's the specialty of deep learning.
That's where I really want to be able to open a software with my point cloud and type into my chat GPT point cloud tool and say, how many windows are in this building? How many, being able to literally start asking the question and it be able to give you an answer or then take to that step of it create something from data, like that interaction of the future of the data and the AI, I think would be.
Well, that's possible right now. Today.
Yeah. That's amazing.
It just has to be implemented.
Yeah. And that's definitely where the future is going. I would say AI and robotics, these are two separate topics, but in robotics, there's like a very, very classical definition that robotic systems do three things. They sense, they plan, they act. Robotic system should be doing all three in some way, shape, or form. Each of those respective components have value to our industry at the same time. And so what we're going to end up seeing, and as we are seeing right now, AI will influence every single one of those three major pillars and build the best systems to be able to perform the best tasks and perform the most efficiently to get the most consistent results. And that is going to be aided by systems that are understanding of how to do actions and how to do them well. And that's an exciting part of the future there.
And just because of time, final thoughts to be shared.
I'll just make a note, keep it a little bit simpler. I'm not an engineer, but root cause of error, rework, or anything, it's always communication. So I think AI is just a good tool to streamline communication. I'll pick on humans again. We're biased in what type of information we share for our personal gain. So I think it brings facts. It brings facts to the table. It brings tangible information that are unbiased. Specifically picking on construction, there's a lot of bias between contractors on, timing and everything. So I think it helps in the negotiation stages to just let everybody communicate on facts.
I think we should be careful though, like although we can get some easy responses from AI, it should not take over, experience, right? Because no matter how much, how many answers AI can provide you with, it's never going to take over the experience and, of a certain person who's been in the trade for a while, who's seen different solutions, who maybe disagree with the way the younger crowd is doing things. So just, kind of remembering to value that experience and respect that experience that maybe others that are not leveraging AI may have, and not be like, oh, well, AI is saying that. I don't care what you've been doing for 60 years if you're teaching me something.
Mm-hmm.
So to try to also leverage that.
Teach the AI like you teach your apprentice. Well, 3 weeks of no sleep teaching the AI how to do estimating, and it's arguably potentially estimating better.
So overall, I think it's been a fun conversation. I think there's definitely a future for both robotics and AI in construction, but also specifically within reality capture, in utilizing data. And I think really we all know and we see it's going to replace certain types of work, and it's going to improve certain types of work, and it's going to create additional jobs. So overall, I would just leave with, let's not be afraid of the future. Instead, we work together to define how we use those tools to better our workforce. Thank you guys for the panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.